Today, we're jumping into a really incredible piece of work by Jonathan Kayomba, and what's so amazing about it is that it speaks two languages at the exact same time. On one hand, you have this mythic, thundering poetry, and on the other, you have the quiet, careful precision of brain science. But here's the thing, they're not fighting each other. They're actually telling the very same story about addiction and recovery. Okay, just take a second with this line from the poetry. It's such a powerful image, right? But here's the central question of this whole explainer. What if that's not just a clever metaphor for making a bad choice? What if it's actually a shockingly accurate description of a biological process, something literally happening inside the brain? That's the idea we're going to chase down today.
So how in the world do you connect these two things, myth and neuroscience? Well, Kayomba presents his work as a single manuscript. It's not two separate books, it's two parts of one whole, and they're meant to be understood together. One part speaks in this language of fire and myth, and the other speaks in the language of brain circuits and clinical studies.
And this, right here, just nails the whole concept. The poetry, that's the burning. It captures that raw, intense, subjective feeling of addiction. The framework, the science, that's the studying. It gives you the structure and the language to actually understand the fire. And when you put them together, that's when they create a path back, a return.
All right, let's start with that fire. The poetry is filled with these huge, powerful figures. Shango, the Yoruba deity of thunder and fire. The devil, this idea of an all-consuming flame. It's all meant to describe the experience of intense, totally uncontrollable craving. It feels ancient, elemental, just completely overwhelming.
Wow, this line gets right to the absolute heart of it. This isn't just about wanting something out there in the world. It's about an internal, self-sustaining fire. The mind of the mind itself always burns. What a profound way to describe that feeling of being trapped by a process inside your own head that you just can't shut off. So, what does science have to say about a fire like that?
Well, believe it or not, science calls this fire incentive sensitization. And the crucial thing to get here is the difference between wanting and liking. In this state, your brain's dopamine systems basically go haywire, making you want something with an unbelievable intensity. But, and this is key, at the exact same time, the actual pleasure you get from it, the liking, is plummeting. The desire becomes totally unhooked from any real reward.
And this image of the devil's party is a perfect picture of that cycle. You want to escape, but the wanting itself is so powerful, it pulls you right back to the barrel, again and again and again. It's a party with no joy left in it, only compulsion. This is that neurobiological loop of incentive sensitization just described as a myth.
Of course, every fire burns down. Every high is followed by a crash. And this brings us to the next stage of the cycle. You can feel the poetry shift here. It moves away from metaphors of fire and starts using metaphors of weight, gravity, and the grave to talk about the brutal reality of withdrawal.
So what is this gravity? What is this hell the poem is talking about? It feels like this huge metaphysical truth, right? But the framework argues it's something very real. It's a measurable biological state of being.
And here it is. The scientific name for that hell is the false zero. It's so important to understand this. It's not a true baseline. It's an artificial deficit state that your brain has been forced into after being flooded with so much stimulation for so long. The brain creates this profound state of reward deficit and stress overload. That gravitational pull isn't in your head, it's real biology. And if we break it down, this feeling of being pulled under is rooted in your physiology. First, you have hedonic downshift. That's a fancy way of saying your brain's ability to feel pleasure has basically gone offline. Then, stress surfeit. Your stress systems are just going wild, totally dysregulated. And that horrible combination is what drives that desperate, compulsive behavior. Anything to escape that state, to get away from the false zero. Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? This is where everything pivots. The framework shifts from just diagnosing the problem to laying out a path to recovery. And the goal isn't what you might think. It's not about chasing another high or climbing some new peak. The goal is just to get back to level ground.
And right on cue, the poetry introduces a new character, he who returns. Now, this isn't some fiery, chaotic god like Shango. This figure represents the quiet, measured, intentional journey back to stability, back to yourself. It's the process of finding solid ground again.
And here we can see the entire journey laid out side by side. Recovery is literally the process of moving from that false zero on the left, that state of being pulled under by a biological deficit, over to the true zero on the right. That's homeostasis, a restored baseline where you actually have agency and personal sovereignty again. You're not being pulled under, you're grounded.
So how do you actually get there? Well, the framework isn't about inventing brand new techniques. It's about integrating tools that are proven to work. It maps directly onto established clinical methods like mindfulness-based relapse prevention. That's where you learn to just sit with an urge and not act on it. It aligns with cognitive behavioral therapy, which he calls the law of substitution, changing your thought patterns. And crucially, it emphasizes building real-world support systems.
This evidence crosswalk, this is like the Rosetta Stone for the entire project. This is where it all just clicks together. It shows that direct, one-to-one mapping. The poetic idea of the fire of wanting is the clinical theory of incentive sensitization. Zero is ground, is the practice of mindfulness. The entire mythic language has a direct clinical translation. It's brilliant.
And this really shows you that this is a holistic model. It's not just about brain chemistry, and it's not just about willpower. Recovery requires social scaffolding. Things like having a stable place to live, a supportive community. These aren't just nice little extras. They are absolutely fundamental to making a return to true zero even possible.
And this might be the most powerful reframe in the entire work. Hitting that rock bottom, that false zero, it doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning. It's not a final collapse. It is the signal for a fundamental reset, a restoration of your baseline self.
You know, underneath all of the science and all of the myth, there's this really deep philosophical core. This line argues against the constant chase for feelings, whether they're good or bad. Recovery isn't about finding a new way to feel better. It's about restoring a state of being, and from that stable state, healthy feelings can finally naturally arise. You have to exist first before you can truly feel. And that, well, it leaves us with a pretty profound question to think about, doesn't it? By weaving together the ancient language of myth and the modern language of neuroscience, this work challenges us to think about recovery in a totally new way. It's not just about stopping a behavior. It's about a fundamental return, a return to solid ground, a return to agency, and ultimately, a return to a state of simply being. So what does that look like for you?